All right, we are back with you, Metal Summoners. Thank you so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us and traveling on to the island of Misfit Toys a little touch earlier than usual that you guys are used to, but it's never too early to rock. So thank you guys, as always, for fluttering on down and joining us. We've got the real Psycho Steve on behalf of the Empress Bobby Dreyer. We also have our beloved Angel, Mr. Angel Alamo, floating down from heaven to join us as well. And speaking of heaven, we all know that song. We are very, very honored to be hanging out and chit-chatting with singer, songwriter, producer, and co-writer of so many great songs, including Heaven with Bryanadams. But Mr. Jimvallance, how are you today, sir? And thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Hey.
Man.
Absolutely.
All the way from England.
Sure.
Yeah.
Speakers on StreamYard. Sounds like they're working. Have a great
Sorry about
Definitely not my
that.
music.
Not mine.
That's me. I was having a good time.
Apparently. Absolutely,
I'm like
for
looking
sure.
for the disco ball. I'm like, where is it?
Well,
Sure,
well, I'm not the one in London.
It's midnight here. I'm like,
Yeah,
if
midnight.
I fall asleep, just ring a bell or something.
That's okay.
No.
That's all right. No, not a problem at all. Well, again, Jim, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your evening with us. We'll definitely have a good time, and we're really honored to get to chat with you a little bit. So we'll jump right into it. You know, with all the amazing songs that you've written with Brian, why don't we just kind of start off right there? How did your partnership and your just getting to know Brian occur? How did you guys meet and develop the partnership that's lasted till now?
I mean, it was a complete accident. I was at Long and McQuaid Music Store in Vancouver with a friend of mine. I don't remember why I was there, buying guitar strings or something. And my friend knew Brian, and Brian was in the store also, and she introduced us. And I knew Brian. We hadn't met before, but he was in a local band, and I was in a local band, and we kind of each knew each other a little bit by name. And we just had a quick conversation, and I asked Brian what he was up to, and he said, not much. And I said, I'm not up to much. And Brian said, why don't we get together and try and write something? And we exchanged phone numbers, and a couple of days later we got together, and we've been writing for, 45 years. We've never stopped. So we stopped a little bit, but I mean, we're still at it.
Absolutely, 100%. And how was it? Of course, the kind of obvious reaction, of course, would be absolutely fantastic. But when you have built something with somebody, like the relationship that you built with Brian and writing all these songs, as you start seeing these songs, taking on lives of their own, and really becoming staples of the music world, covered by other bands, whether it be Heaven, Summer of '69, Run to You, as well as many, many others. When you really see these songs, growing legs and then taking on lives of their own, and knowing that you had a part in that, how do you look back at that, and especially when it happens?
Well, I mean, it's great, especially when people do covers. It's a real honor. And also great to hear other people's interpretations of songs. I mean, songs start just two guys in a room, usually a room with no windows, and it's just the two of you. And so you're each other's audience for however many hours or days it takes to finish a song. And then the song goes out into the world, and it's out of your hands. It's like either people love it or they don't. And if people love it, then it becomes a hit. And sometimes if it becomes a hit, then you get other people recording covers of it. So it just, there's songs I've written that you will never hear because they never even got out of that room with no windows. But the ones that do get out, I mean, you kind of want them to take flight, and have a life of their own. So yeah, it's a thrill. It's a thrill to hear your music out there because that's why you do it. That's what you, when you're a kid, you want to be a musician, and then you're an adult and you are a musician, and you want things to happen. You want to make a living at it for starters. That's kind of the main thing. But no, it's a beautiful thing when the songs go out there and have a life of their own.
Absolutely, 100% for sure. Psycho Steve, let's bring you in, my guy.
All right. So it's an honor to meet you, sir. I've been following your career for a very, very long time. I am probably the biggest Kiss fan you'll ever meet, next to Gene. Because, Gene's his biggest fan. So I'm going to piggyback kind of off of the question that Jay asked about Bryanadams. I know Brian wrote with Kiss. I know you wrote with Kiss. How did that come about?
The Kiss thing was one day the phone rang and my wife answered and she said, "It's Michael Jackson." I was like, "What?" Hello? He says, "Hi, this is Michael James Jackson." So it was Kiss's producer, a Canadian guy by the name of Michael, I think it's Michael James.
Yep.
Yeah. Real nice guy. And he said, "Look, I'm producing the next Kiss album. How would you like to write with Jane?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, this is 1982. So Brian and I had been together at this point about 4 years. But I mean, and we had worked really hard, but not a whole lot had happened for us. I mean, it's brutal. It takes a long time to get a career going. So we're 4 years in, and we suddenly get a request to write with Kiss. So that was a huge thing for us. So Brian, I believe, I don't quite remember the order of things. I think Brian went down to LA and wrote with a drummer. What do you remember? Do you remember his
Eric
name?
Carr.
Eric Carr.
Yep.
They started a song.
Right.
Then Brian came back up to Vancouver, and Brian and I finished it, and it was called "Don't Leave Me Lonely." But Kiss didn't record, but Brian ended up recording it. So that was kind of our first foray into the Kiss thing. And then Gene sent us a little demo idea, like a guitar riff. And Brian and I hammered away on that for a few days and came up with War Machine, and then a little back and forth with Gene on that. And then there was a third song that I had written for BTO originally, back in Turner Overdrive, called Rock and Roll Hell.
Right.
Brian and I rewrote the verses with Kiss in mind, and we sent that down to Gene. This is before email. So everything went back and forth. We put a cassette tape in a FedEx envelope, and stuff went back and forth. So, it wasn't like MP3s by email. This was like just one step up from Pony Express. It was, slow by today's comparison, but it was what you had to do back then. So then Gene phones us and says, if you heard Rock and Roll Hall, he says, I love this. We're definitely going to record it. And Brian and I were both in the same room, but on different phones. I could see Brian across the room. And Gene says, "There's just one problem. It needs another verse." And I look at Brian, and Brian looks at me, and we kind of shake our head like, I don't think so. Like we told Gene, we think it's fine. He goes, "No, you don't understand. It needs another verse, and I'm going to write it." So, in other words, what he was saying is, if this is going to go on a Kiss album, it's going to have Gene's name on it. So, I mean, to his credit, he didn't take a very big percentage, but he did write some lyrics, and they did record it, and so that was a real bonus. So that was kind of our Kiss experience.
So you weren't like in the actual studio with him. You were basically in Canada. Yeah. He was in California, and you just were pen pals for a while, basically.
Yeah, it was all long distance. Yeah, we never did end up in the same room. I guess Brian was in the same room with Eric.
Gotcha.
But the thing with Gene, no, it was long distance.
They were tape trading.
Yeah. It's the day trading, tape trading. Nice.
Yeah.
because so in 1979, very late 79, early 80, I wrote back and forth with Gene like several times versus email, of course. So
Yeah.
it took like 2 months to get a response back
Yeah.
from him. So
Cool.
I never did anything FedEx until years later with him. But yeah.
Are you still in touch?
Not as much as we had a little falling out, but we smoothed things over. About 2.5 years ago, last time I saw him, I took my children to go see them, and Gene and I finally kind of like buried the hatchet because he's getting older, I'm getting older. I was just like, come on.
Yeah.
And Tommy Thayer, the guitarist of Kiss now, his ex-wife is a very dear friend of mine, and she called him out on it and says, how long have you known Steve? Since 1980. And she's like, Gene, get off the cross. We need the wood. Chill out. You guys have to make things right because, tomorrow's never promised. And let's hear it. And then when I went to see him, I apologized. He apologized. He gave me a hug. He gave me a kiss on the cheek.
That's great.
So, and he goes, you're looking good. And he's making fun of my beard. And I'm like, well, I lost the hair in the divorce, Dad. Well, I told you.
Tommy Thayer, he was, what band was he in? Black and Blue before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Tommy before he joined Kiss. I did some writing with Black and Blue.
Sweet.
Yeah, nice piece. Real
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Jamie and the whole gang of great guys too.
Yeah, they were lovely. Yeah.
So awesome.
We saw that. We can do that. Bobby, you're tagged in.
Great. So, Jim, I just reached out to a good friend of mine who's a good friend of yours, and that would be Mr. Mark Hudson.
Oh, I love Mark. He's one of my favorites.
And I just talked. He and Melissa were just getting back and forth, and I was trying to get Mark to come on. There's there's a little bit of a problem right now. They have a good friend of theirs who's dealing with a cancer situation. But Mark sends his love. He would love to come on. He and Melissa love you to death and send their love. But I want to go on the Aerosmith binge. I've known Mr. Hudson for, oh my gosh, for years. And look, who doesn't love Mark?
He is a one-off. He's a true original.
Yeah. There'll never be another Mark Hudson.
There never will be.
That's good.
So I got to ask this: how did that relationship start out? With you and Mark, and
Well, I mean, Mark and I go so far back. I mean, I was 18 when I met Mark, and he was 19 in Vancouver.
Wow.
He and his brothers had moved up to Vancouver. I think they were draft dodgers. I'm not really sure, but I think that was the reason. You'd have to ask him.
Mark, are you a draft dodger? No.
And so I was working for no pay at a recording studio in Vancouver, just cleaning up the cables and bringing coffee to the engineer and that sort of thing, which was a dream job for me. I mean, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. And the Hudson brothers were recording. I was there for some of their sessions. And then Mark and I sort of lost touch after that for a while. And I don't think we hooked up again until we were both working with Aerosmith or Ozzy. And that's when we kind of, connected again after like many, many, many years. And he's just the loveliest, most talented, crazy, brilliant guy ever.
Crazy that adjective doesn't even.
Yeah, but good crazy. Yeah.
But you guys worked on an iconic album. You did Get a Grip. And Mark wrote probably one of the most, I don't want to use anthemic, but we got the passing of John Lennon coming up, and we all know Mark's background on the Beatles and everything else. But Living on the Edge, and then the stuff you did on, Get a Grip, wow.
Well, I mean, Stephen, again, was kind of responsible for me and Mark ending up in the same circle again, too, Stephen Tyler. So Mark and I didn't work together on the Aerosmith album. There was no co-writes. We were working separately with Stephen and Joe. But yeah, Living on the Edge, that's classic. It's such a good song.
Well, not to discredit, the stuff you did on that album was very, prophetic. I mean, there was just, what a great album. I mean, look, I just had the opportunity to shoot Aerosmith for, I was a stand-in for Mark Weiss at Fenway Park to be the photographer.
Yeah.
And amazing. But to work with a band that's been through longevity of the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, do it in residency in Vegas. I mean, look, there'll never be another Steven Tyler. There'll never be another Joe Perry.
Yeah. That's totally original. Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick. How did that relationship with you and them start out? How did, that come about?
I think it was John. Yeah, it was John Kalodner. So John Kalodner signed Aerosmith to Geffen, and my understanding is prior to that, and I didn't know the band before then, so I'm just going with what I've read. Is they'd been through some rough times with addiction and issues, and so they had all gone into rehab, and Kalodner signed them to Geffen Records on the condition that they all get sober, and they all stay sober. So I'd done an Ian Lloyd project for Kalodner prior, so I think that's how I came into Kalodner's radar. And so he asked me if I'd like to. I think he was lining up a bunch of writers for Aerosmith. I think he realized, or at least convinced them, that they would maybe benefit from some outside writers to sort of light a fire. So there was Desmond Child, myself, and Mark Hudson, maybe more if you can remember, but we were kind of the three main guys that Kalodner brought in to help Aerosmith. This is Permanent Vacation. This is before Get a Grip.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Permanent Vacation. So Aerosmith, and also Bruce Fairbairn.
Yeah.
Was brought in by Kalodner to produce Permanent Vacation. And that's a whole other story. Bruce and I go way back, Prism and even before. That's the bell to wake me up, right?
Good morning.
Yeah. So the Kalodner, the Fairbairn connection. So I mean, I remember the first day because I'm an Aerosmith fan. I'd never met them, and you pinch yourself. So here I am. Bruce Fairbairn comes to my studio, which is in the basement of my home, and he brings Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. And there's that deodorant commercial way back, and the hook was "Never let them see you sweat." Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, okay, so Steven Tyler and Joe Perry are in my basement, and you don't want to. You're freaking out, but you don't want to show it. Anyway, so Bruce introduces us, and he says, "Okay, you know what? This is like noon." He says, "I'll be back at 6:00. Pick up the boys for dinner. I hope you have something by then." So and then he leaves. So I'm there. I am with Stephen and Joe, and we just kind of sat for a minute, kind of had a bit of a quick chat, got acquainted. Joe plugged in his guitar, played a riff he was working on. I picked up my bass, and by 6:00 we had most of the song Ragdoll. So that was our first day. March. I actually remember March.
1 second.
Hi, Bobby.
Hey, real quick, Jim, I have Melissa Hudson on the phone.
Oh, hi there.
Hi, Jim.
Miss you guys. Miss you. Oh,
So I got to say this. Melissa just sent me a note, and I'm extremely touched. A gentleman who I met through the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp through Mark and everything, Alan White, and she just informed me, I did not know that you played the memorial service for Alan White of Yes.
Exactly. It just happened on this past Sunday. So he was out in Seattle. They played a benefit. It also benefited Why Hunger, which is a something that Alan, for most of his life, has been a part of. So that was a really nice touch. And his wife Gigi was there, and obviously people who we all know and love from Yes, and Spike Edney from Queen, and a lot of lovely individuals all celebrating Alan White as we know him.
Wow. Lovely.
Jim, thank you. This was great. I love the 6 degree of separation. And Melissa, thank you for, picking up the phone and doing this.
Of course.
Love Melissa and love Tamara. Miss you guys.
Miss you. Love you. We'll talk soon, everybody.
All right.
So tell us a little bit how your relationship there with Alan White came about for you to do that event right there. And then I'll throw it back to Jay.
Me and Alan White?
Yeah.
My only connection, sorry, that I wasn't part of that memorial service. So Yes recorded an album at my studio in Vancouver. So that's where I know Alan from.
Which album would that be?
The latter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one of their later albums. And again, Bruce Fairbairn produced that. So that was, these are all like full circle things,
But wasn't that the last album with John Anderson?
Possibly. I'm not really up on the catalog, but I was a fan. Close to the Edge is one of my favorite albums of all.
And they're going out on the 50th anniversary tour right now.
Wow. Amazing band. I've only seen them once or twice, like back in the 70s. I saw the Toramato tour, I think.
I did that, and I've been a fan for years. First album was Yes Songs, which blew my doors off.
Yeah.
But amazing that she brought that up, and what a great connection the two of you guys have had, and
right. Just for the folks that are watching who don't know, Alan not only was he the drummer in Yes, he played on John Lennon's Imagine. So just a brilliant career. Brilliant.
Wow.
Jay?
Yeah. No, that's super duper rad. Absolutely. Angel, let's bring you in, my good guy. How are you doing this evening? Thanks for hooking this up. And how are the Metal Summoners doing?
Also, just as a music fan, how can you not be starstruck? That's just a realistic, butterflies in your stomach, a starstruck feeling, because as a music fan, you buy the albums, you open up, you write, you read the songwriting credits, you see the name Jimvallance, and now to be face to face, I'm on cloud nine.
Wow.
No pun intended. I know that's another Bryanadams song.
We didn't write that though.
No,
buy hard copies of things, fans, because you can't read the liner notes on a download.
Yeah.
Yes. So now that I had my cheesy fan moment, get to and take a deep breath. Hey, we're all music fans, so we all know the feeling.
Absolutely.
Me too.
Right.
I do it for the money. What are you talking about?
Guys, come on.
Like we make money here. Anyway, proceed.
Hey, Jim, real quick, you wrote one of my favorite songs, which is so off the wheelhouse of everybody, and it's Glass Tiger. And don't forget about, oh my God, don't forget about me. Even now when I hear it, what a great hook song. Iconic.
Great guys, good friends. We had a really good time working on that album. Again, we're going back 85, I think it was. But we're still in touch. They're good friends.
Are they still touring? Are they doing anything right now?
Yeah, they've never really stopped. So they tour. They're down to 3 original members, I think, just Ellen, Sam, and Al. But yeah, they're still doing it.
Let me ask, how did that song come about?
The same way every song comes about. You start with a blank notepad, and you pick up a guitar, and you just kind of go fishing, you know. But as John Lennon said, he never wrote a song that he didn't steal from somewhere. So,
All right, so where'd you steal the hook from? Because that's a freaking great hook.
So that one, there's a ascending.
Love it. Yes, bring the guitar out.
There's this ascending thing that we kind of borrowed from Simple Minds. What was that song?
Don't you forget about me?
Yeah, we kind of semi-borrowed the title and semi-borrowed some of the, and Tears for Fears. That was the other one.
Everybody wants to rule the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the ascending chord. So again, the whole idea, and we can come back to this conversation later, but you brought up Kiss earlier. I'm just going to digress for a minute, but one of Kiss's big hits, and Desmond Child was responsible for much of this one, was I Was Made for Loving You. So that was like later, sort of out of character, kind of a disco thing, but it was a huge hit for Kiss. And the melody was 4 notes: A, B, C, D, E. I was made for loving you, baby. And they got sued by Motown, who said it sounded too much like standing in the shadows of love, A, B, C, D, E. Not that anybody owns those 4 notes, but when Motown comes after you with all the clout they have behind them, you're kind of done. And I wrote a song with Aerosmith called "Take Me to the Other Side," which is also "Take Me to the Other Side," A, B, C, D, E. And Motown sued us too. So the idea is, and we weren't even thinking about the song "Standing in the Shadows of Love," but those are 4 or 5 notes that just kind of fall together. But you have to be really careful that you're not treading on somebody else's creative territory. So with the Glass Tiger thing, we kind of borrowed slightly a little bit of that ascending thing from Tears for Fears, and a little bit of the title from Simple Minds, and you just kind of take all this stuff and you put it in the blender, and then out comes hopefully a song that hasn't borrowed too substantially from any other sources. But that's kind of where that song came from. We were mining some influences.
Jim, there's 7 notes, and
yeah,
whole tones, half tones, everything. Hudson told me a lot of things. I've done a lot with Mark, and he goes, "Look, Ringo even told him the best people steal.
Yeah.
we don't borrow, we steal."
Yeah, what does it say? Amateurs borrow, professionals steal. I think that was the like that. But no, seriously though, this is serious business. You can get in a whole boatload of trouble if you borrow or steal, too obviously. So you have to always, as a songwriter, always monitor yourself. Yeah, I'm kind of grabbing a little bit of an idea from this song, but I'm not gonna.
Oh, we're not gonna go with George Harrison, a little bit there, are we?
Yeah, that was
She's so fine. Oh wait.
Yeah, that was a slam dunk. He got totally hammered for that, and rightly so. So that's the trick. Yeah, borrow, but don't get caught.
Absolutely, 100%. Angel, let's kick it back to you, buddy. Do we have any fan questions at the moment?
Yes, we do.
Awesome.
So, what are your favorite songs that you have written?
Wow, there's hundreds to choose from. I've got a soft spot for Summer '69 that I wrote with Brian.
Yes, I love that one.
Maybe because it's I mean, a lot of the writing I do is, fiction. You're just writing like a little mini short story or a little screenplay, and you're drawing on influences maybe, but it's not really about you. But that's the one song that has maybe more of me in it, and Brian too. But we were drawing on our high school years and our first girlfriends and our first bands. It was kind of an autobiographical lyric. So I'm fond of that one. If it comes on the radio, I don't turn it off. I'm fond.
That kind of goes into the next fan question, which has to do about first. Julie wants to know. She's curious about your. Sorry, still starstruck. She's curious about your first band.
Well, I mean, it depends how far you want to go back. My very, very first band was in high school. Again, summer '69. Me and some guys from school. We had a band and we tried real hard. And the original lyric. The original lyric for that, instead of Jimmy quit and Jody got married, it was Gordy quit and Chuck got married. I think that was the original lyric. Those are the guys from my high school band. And Brian said, Chuck and Gordy, we can't do that. And he suggested Jimmy and Jody. But anyway, so my first band was Wayne, Gordy, Chuck, and me in grade 8 or 9, way back. Of course, nothing ever came of it recording-wise. So that was just like the first band. So if that was the question, then there's the answer. That was my first band, called the Tremolones, Vanderhoof, British Columbia.
Wow.
And my question is, did you ever have any songs that were the most difficult or were the hardest for you to actually complete?
You know what? They're never easy. It never just falls out of the sky or falls into your lap. It's always hours and hours of writing and rewriting. And then, I mean, let's stay with Summer '69 for a second. I mean, Brian and I wrote that in January '84, and it wasn't called Summer '69. It was called Best Days of My Life. So those were the best days of my life, and that's where it stopped. The Summer '69 wasn't even in it, and we kind of left it for a few weeks, and we came back to it, and we went, I don't think this song's finished. We need to have a stronger title than that, and that's when we kind of added the lyric Summer '69. So that song, we kind of left it and came back to it. So it took maybe a month to write that song on and off. So it's never like, I can't think of a song ever that just kind of fell out of the sky in an hour. It's always like writing, rewriting, coming back to it, having a second look at it. It's hard work, but I think you have to put in the work. That's what makes a difference. You put in the work and you're going to get a good song out of it eventually.
Hey, Jim, how did you get involved with Reckless album? How did you bring Tina Turner involved on, It's Only Love?
That was sort of an accident as well. The song wasn't written with her in mind at all. So we had written it, already recorded it, and it was Brian singing the whole song by himself. And Tina Turner happened to be in Vancouver opening for Lionel Richie. She was touring.
Wow.
And Brian knew Tina's manager, and he thought, wow, I wonder if we could get her to sing on this. So he rang up Roger and put the question, and Roger said, yeah, we'll make this happen. So she came down to the studio, and the song was written in Brian's key. So, Tina is a female singer. Her natural key is probably about 3 notes above. And so she came in the studio and she did one try, and it didn't work. It was like wrong key for her, and was like, oh man. And I thought it wasn't going to happen. And then she said, roll back, let me try it again. And she kind of took the melody up 3 notes, and it was amazing. I mean, that's what you hear now. She just nailed it. and that came together very, very quickly. I mean, she was just so amazing in the studio, such a professional, so nice to work with. And yeah, she just killed it. She's the real deal.
I got to ask, those guitar hits in the beginning, who came up with that for It's Only Love?
I mean, I never remember who really, you know, I'm not going to say it was me. Is Brian listening? No, it was all me. I mean, we just all.
I'm telling you right now, you just hit that. I'm like, got goosebumps. They're like the best guitar hits ever. And just to hear that, you know, coming through.
Well, like I said, the two of us just sat in a room with no windows, and just literally a normal day was noon till midnight. We just never gave up until we did what we thought was the best work that we could do. So yeah, putting in the time, it's work. It's
Wow.
fun, but it's work.
Wow.
Absolutely, 100%. No, couldn't have said it better by anybody. It definitely makes the most sense because that's exactly how you get things done, by concentrating on them until they're right. Steve, let's bring you back in, brother man.
So, with all the songs you wrote and all the artists that you've recorded and written with, is there anybody that you haven't, that you still want to get an opportunity to do? Or are you now getting the chance to do it since you're so acclaimed with all the songs, the plethora of hits that you've done?
I mean, you know, that's. I mean, my heroes. You'd love to one day work with your heroes. So I mean, for me, that would be like Paul McCartney. But I told you about how freaked out I was having Stephen and Joe walk into my house.
Right.
But I managed to pull it together, and we got some songs written. I don't think I could even pull myself together to sit down with Paul McCartney. I would be just too freaked out. So, sorry?
Have you ever met him?
I have. He's a really, really nice guy. I've met him 3 times.
Nice.
Yeah. But I think, so to answer your question, yeah, I'd love to write with Paul McCartney, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could do it. Yeah, I'd be too freaked out. Yeah, nor does he need any help. You know, he's you know.
Just FedEx cassettes back and forth with him. Keep it in your comfort zone.
There you go.
But isn't there a little help with your friends?
There you go.
There you go. Right on.
That's awesome, man. Go ahead, Steve. Stay with it, bud.
All right. So, who in your family got you into music?
Well, really nobody. I think I was a sort of an anomaly. The radio was on at home when I was growing up. You know, I'd heard a few little things just peripherally. I remember like Mac the Knife by Bobby Darin, you know, a few things being on the radio. But my mom played a little bit of piano. She took piano lessons as an adult, so I remember her practicing. But music wasn't a big part of our family life. And it wasn't even on my radar. Music was not something I even thought about when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old. I was into Batman comics, and I followed baseball. I liked the New York Yankees.
Yeah, Judge with the 62. All right.
Yeah. And then one day, every Sunday night, the family got together in front of the TV. We'd have dinner. And me and my sister would get our pajamas on, and we'd all sit in front of the TV for the Ed Sullivan Show. And this one night, you know, usually it was like jugglers and clowns and comedians and that sort of thing. And then this one night, it's like, you know, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. And I was like, what? I saw these 4 guys, and it just like blew me away. I did not know what had just happened. It absolutely floored me, and I knew right then. I was 11 years old. I knew right then, at that very moment, that's what I want to do. It just slayed me.
Wow.
And then they were on again the next Sunday and the next Sunday. And I still haven't recovered. That totally just changed my life right then, right there. So from that moment on, all I thought about, all I talked about, all I cared about was music.
Sweet.
Totally life altering.
Wow. Hey, Jim, real quick. What about heart? What about love? How did that all come about right there? How did you get the relationship, with Ann and Nancy?
Well, I love this story. Thanks for asking. So I wrote What About Love with a band called Toronto, from Toronto. The guitar player, there were two guitar players in the band, a lady and a guy, Sharon Alton and Brian Allen. So I got asked to write with them. So I went back to Toronto and we wrote 3 or 4 songs, and What About Love was one of them. And then when it came time to choose 12 songs for the album, for whatever reason, I think the band each had a vote. I think that I wasn't there for this meeting, but apparently they all sat around a table and they had 20 songs to choose from. And as each song came up, they would all go, yeah. And long story short, What About Love didn't make it.
Really?
Yeah, it didn't make it. So it was then a rejected song. It was an orphan. It was 1982, and I actually forgot about the song. For some reason, I didn't take a cassette tape with me when I went back to Vancouver. I still don't have one. I'd give a limb for the little tape, the little recording we did in Sharon and Brian's basement. But anyway, so about 3 years later, 1985, I get a call from this guy in LA, Don Grierson from Capitol Records. And he says, congratulations, you've got the first single on the new Heart album. And I said, what song would that be? And he said, What About Love? I went, you're kidding. I'd completely forgotten about the song.
Wow.
So what had happened is, the band Toronto were on a Canadian label called Solid Gold, and they went out of business. And their entire song catalog was purchased by EMI Music Canada. And Mike McCarty, who was a publisher working at EMI, took the time to go through every single song that they had acquired from Solid Gold, whether they'd been recorded or not recorded. And he came across What About Love, and he thought, this could be great for Heart. So he sent it to Don Grierson in LA. Don Grierson sent it to Ron Nevison, who was producing what would be Heart's next album. And I didn't hear this story till, actually quite recently, only about 2 years ago. So I didn't hear this story for 30 plus years later. But Ron Nevison flew up to Seattle, played the song for Ann and Nancy Wilson. Nancy got up and walked out of the room, said, I will not record this song. And Ann said, I hate it. We're not recording it. and Ron Nevison said, look, I think it's a hit. Do me a favor, record it. If you still hate it, I promise we won't release it. And so they recorded it. I think during the process of recording it, they sort of warmed up to the idea. And then it ended up being their comeback single. And thank you, Ann and Nancy, and grateful, very grateful for that.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Because look, you think about it, their career went to a level, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, 80s are coming around. Who really knew? And that song came out. I remember the video and everything, and I'm just going, that Who Will You Turn To and everything. You did a whole 180 for the band.
Well, apparently they were in trouble. They had their previous album had not done well at all, and I think they were like going to be dropped from the label if they didn't have a hit, something like that. So
was that the Bad Animals album?
was right before that.
No, it was called, the album was just called Heart, I think.
Yeah, that was the Heart album. That was the
But then
song
they
that
broke
music
through
video
and
also
then
gets
they really
regularly
became-
referred to as like the gas mask. Like,
Yeah, but they really became the 80s, you know, between they and Starship, and everybody started coming out with these mega hits at the
Yeah.
time that were very anthetic. And thank you for doing that. Wow, what what a great story.
Speaking of Starship, I think Grace Slick and Mickey
Jones.
Thomas.
Thomas.
are on What About Love. I think they sing backing vocals on What About Love.
That's
Wow.
mind blown.
I know.
dude, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny too because that whole album is great, but it's interesting too because like I was saying, like there was also a certain amount of just like band backlash that was going on in that time too, especially with what was coming up in music videos and MTV and stuff like that, because that was also like, you know, not to be a downer, I just mean this as an innocent topic of conversation, but that was also at a time when people were starting to take some shots at Anne for just changing, you know, for know whatever reason, you know, for people, their bodies change for different reasons, and because, you know, MTV is you know king of what, and they want everybody to be, you know, the beautiful people. There was a certain amount of backlash that Heart was just getting as a visual appearance band as well.
Yeah, very, very unfair.
Yeah.
Hey,
absolutely.
Jim, I got to throw this before I throw it back. So you did Heaven with Bryanadams. You had Steve Smith playing drums. Which,
Yeah, from
what
Journey.
a great freaking song, and which really, you know, blew it up. But how'd you get Steve from Journey to get involved with Brian?
Well, I wasn't there for the session, so that was recorded in New York, and Brian was doing the Reckless album back. No, this was before Reckless. Actually, Heaven was on Reckless in '85, but it was recorded in '82. We wrote it for a film. Yeah, it was recorded. It was recorded way before Reckless, and in fact, it wasn't even necessarily going to be on Reckless. That was the last minute decision. So it had already been around for a couple of years. It was on it was a very sort of one of those movies that disappeared. It opened on the weekend and then you never heard from it again. It was a really awful movie called A Night in Heaven.
Yes, I've seen it.
And we wrote the song for that movie. And then the song was on the soundtrack album, and you know, nothing ever came of it. So we kind of forgot that song for a little bit. But thankfully, a few years later, Brian pulled it out of the vault and included it on Reckless. But anyway, back to the Steve Smith thing. So Brian had been touring with Journey and got to know the guys quite well. And so Brian's in New York recording Heaven, and his drummer Mickey Curry said, if I understand the story right, Mickey said, "Look, I've got 2 hours, and then I got to leave. So you know, we have to get this done." So anyway, for whatever reason, 2 hours came up. They hadn't finished it yet, and Mickey said, "I'm sorry, I think he had a Hall & Oates session booked or something, and he had to."
Yep, he did.
He had to go. So Brian goes, "We don't have a drummer." So he phones Steve and says, Can you get down here? And Steve says, yeah. And he came down and finished the session and did a great job. I mean, Mickey's a great drummer. But
of course. Was that during the Big Bam Boom era, right? When that album came out, when Mickey was doing that?
The Hall & Oates thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was still, Mickey at that time was still Hall & Oates drummer. So Brian hadn't really got him yet full time. He was playing on Brian's records, and Brian was saying, "Look, if you ever get a chance, you know, if you ever want to leave Hall & Oates, you gotta do that." You know? So
but to bring Steve Smith in, I'm like, what? Wow, what? You know,
he played beautifully on it. Big drum fills. Yeah, great job.
Awesome.
That's killer. That's so sick. So
Yeah.
I want to jump in with some curiosity band stuff because we talked very briefly about it off the air, but you did writing with the Scorpions.
I did.
And I'd love to hear about how you worked with the Scorpions. You did the song "Don't Believe Her," which happens to be my favorite Scorpions song, of not only just off Crazy World, but off of their entire catalog. So how did working with the Scorpions become a thing?
Gosh, I'm a little blank on that.
That's okay.
It might have been the record company that that brought me in, but Klaus and Rudolph and Herman all came over to Vancouver, and again, it was like the Aerosmith thing, where you've never met these guys before, you're a fan, and suddenly they're in your basement studio. So I had a really wonderful time with them. I mean, they're just, I mean, they're a little bit funny because they're so so German in an English speaking world. So I think some of what I did was correct some of the grammar and bring some of the English stuff into the mix. But we were all on the same page. I mean, I'm like a Scorpions fan, and I just kind of slotted in like I was a temporary member of the band.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was great having Herman there, the drummer, and Rudolph is such a great chunky rhythm player. He's just amazing guitar player, and Klaus, he's like a cheerleader. He just keeps things rolling all the time. So yeah, that was a really special time. I enjoyed doing that album with him. Crazy World.
That's
World.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's so
love
rad.
that album.
And I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about Prism as well. Taking it nice and far back. But what I just kind of wanted to ask is like, was that your first like major like getting into like the songwriting experience? Like would you say that's the beginning of everything was with Prism?
Yeah, pretty much, and maybe even that question that came in a few minutes ago about my first band, maybe they were thinking more like Prism, like my first recording band, rather than my first way back high school band. But Prism is the first opportunity I had to write and then get the songs recorded. So the band that Prism kind of came from two separate bands. There was a Vancouver band called Seeds of Time, and then there was another band called Sunshine, and members from those two bands kind of came together and formed Prism. So the Sunshine band, I had joined them in 1973, and I was with them for the summer of 73 and a bit beyond. And then I left, and I actually went over to Europe for a year. And then when I came back in 74, hoping to get my job back as the drummer for Sunshine, they had already hired another drummer, so I was kind of out of luck. So I spent most of 1974 just doing session work, and I wasn't in a band. And for that whole year, Sunshine were writing songs and recording and trying to get a record deal, and they just kept getting turned down. And so Bruce Fairburn, who was in Sunshine in 1975, he came to me and said, "Look, we just can't seem to get any traction here. Do you have any songs?" Because the songs they were writing weren't getting any attention from record companies. He said, "Do you have any songs?" And I actually spent most of 1974 just writing, not for anything in particular. But I had 3 or 4 songs kicking around: Spaceship Superstar, Open Soul Surgery. So I played those for Bruce, and he said, yeah, these are good. So Sunshine went back in and recorded two of my songs and sent them out, and they got a record deal. So that was kind of the beginning. And then I got rehired back into the band, and we made the album over the period of about 6 months, 75, 76, somewhere in there. And it finally came out in 77. So it was a long, slow process, very slow process. But then right out of the gate, it was we had some hits in Canada. Spaceship Superstar was a big radio hit.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to blow this out. We're going to go a little Christmas right now. Tears are not enough.
I knew, Bobby, that you would bring that up eventually.
Look, we're going to go the Canadian Band-Aid right now.
Okay.
I was going into this interview going, let's see how long it takes Bobby to go Canadian Christmas.
Yes. Hello. Well, it's Boxing Day for them.
Right.
What's the question? How did that come?
So I really want to know how really, right when, do they know it's Christmas? But how did you come out, with the whole thing? Tears are not enough.
Well, as you mentioned, it started with "Do They Know It's Christmas?" Bob Geldof, and that record that was done in England.
And wait, let's give a beautiful nod to your wife, Rachel.
Yeah. She wrote the French lyrics.
Yes.
So "Do They Know It's Christmas" was a big hit and a big fundraiser for African famine relief. And then after that was "We Are the World." USA got all their big stars together, Springsteen and Cyndi Lauper and Stevie Wonder and everyone. They did "We Are the World." And while they were recording "We Are the World," Quincy Jones, who was the producer, phoned David Foster, who was in Canada doing an album with the Payolas and at Little Mountain Sound in Vancouver. And I happened to be at Little Mountain Sound that day doing I don't even remember, I think I might have been playing drums on a McDonald's commercial or something like that, just doing session work. And I was sitting in the lobby, and there was two studios. I was in Studio A, and David Foster was in Studio B. And I'm just sitting in the lobby, and David comes out of Studio B, like looking like, panicked, emergency. And he goes, "Jim, you have a home studio." I said, "Yeah." He says, "We need to write a song. I just got a phone call from Quincy Jones, and he said, do a Canadian song for African famine relief." So I just happened to be the first guy Foster saw. So that's how I got pulled into it. So, and it was like they needed a song like real quick. So I think this was probably a Friday, I'm thinking. So Foster and I got together that night. He came over to my place, and we started working on the song. Brian was out of town; he was touring, but he came back the next day, and he jumped in, and we had a song written by Sunday, as I recall, and then Brian's manager Bruce Allen started calling people like Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Burton Cummings, Eddie Lee. And so from Sunday to Sunday. So we the next Sunday we were in Toronto recording the song. So literally from the day Foster walked out and said, "Jim, we need to write a song," until the day we were in the studio with all those people was like a week. And it was amazing. It was just like such a whirlwind thing.
So, Jim, I'm going to throw it back. Let's talk about your wife. Let's talk about Rachel.
Okay.
How did that relationship come about? And look, she's done. We brought in "Tears Are Not Enough," that end, and you brought in that she did the Canadian version or the French version of the lyrics right there. How did your relationship start right there?
Again, music business. I was hired by Capitol Records to produce. Dean Cameron was the head of A&R at Capitol Records at the time, and she was in a band called Cano, and Dean hired me to produce the band, and that's how we met. And then interesting, it was only a few years later that Dean is also the one who called me and said, "Do you want to work with this band, Glass Tiger?" Who at the time were literally a garage band. They were like 5 teenagers in a garage in Newmarket, Ontario. So Dean did a lot of good things. He put me together with some really good people over the years, and then he became president of Capitol Records, and sadly he's no longer with us. But terrific guy.
But let me emphasis. Cano was not just that band. Look, they got in the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame and started in '76, and I mean, that's just not like a little ta-da right there.
No, they were
Did you know her
very
prior,
good band.
to her doing what she was doing, or how did that all come about?
Again, sorry.
How did you guys interact? I mean, how did it all come about? Did you know her before Cano, or
No, that was the first meeting. So just being hired to, I flew back again. I was living in Vancouver. They were living in Sudbury, Ontario. So, I flew back there, and all of these things, they're always kind of an audition. Like even with Glass Tiger, you go and meet them, and you're trying to decide, do you really want to work with them, and they're trying to decide they really want to work with you. It's like a two-way thing, So that was the case with Cano. I went back and spent a couple of days in Sudbury, and we decided we could work together.
Jim, has most of your work been done more in the French provincial area, up in Quebec, Toronto, Montreal area? Is that where you're more or less based?
No, I live in New York now, but I've lived in a couple of different places. So Vancouver is really where I got my start. So that's where I met Mark Hudson back in 1970. That's how long I've known Mark, and that's why
I know Mark, and he's listening right now. Mark, we know you're not a spring chicken, no, but have you? And he just hit me up. He goes, "F you, Bobby." What about working with bands like Triumph or Rush or a lot of the other bands from the area? Have you worked with what you mentioned, Getty, but have you worked with Rick Emmett or any of those gentlemen up there?
I haven't, and again, I think your question is maybe geographical, because Canada is a big country. It's a long way from Toronto to Vancouver, and in fact, for me, Los Angeles was a whole bunch closer. So that was Los Angeles was more of from Vancouver. That's kind of where you went if you were trying to get a record deal or get involved in the music business. Toronto was just this place way over there somewhere. So I had very little interaction with the Toronto scene. First of all, Rush were very self-contained. They didn't need any help co-writing. I'm sure the same was true for Triumph. So, my career was based on artists who either didn't write their own songs or got to a place in their career where they needed someone like me or Mark or Desmond Child to come in and give them a bit of a kick.
And before I throw it back to Jim, real quick, how is your relationship now with Bryan?
Great. He's my brother from another mother. We get along great. We're best friends.
Are we expecting anything new? Look, we've all been Bryanadams fans. There's just me especially being, God, everything Bryan's did from Cuts Like a Knife to Robin Hood.
He's unstoppable. His energy is absolutely stunning. From the day I met him, in fact, I think that's what attracted me to him in that music store. He was, when I met him, he was 18 years old and didn't have a whole lot going on, but I just knew that he had boundless energy and infinite talent. And he's still that guy. He's just unstoppable. He's never not doing something. He's either touring or writing or or recording. He's a remarkable guy. So yeah, to answer your question, there's always going to be new stuff from Brian. Always.
That's great.
Awesome. Hell yeah, for sure. Angel, let's kick it back up to you, brother man. How are you doing? Still doing good? And how are the Summoners?
I'm doing good. I just got to get to the fan questions. Lisa wants to know, what is your favorite Bryanadams song?
If she means one that I didn't write, it would probably be, I think Everything I Do is pretty darn good. That's a really good song. So it's interesting for me as Brian's longtime collaborator, but I'm also a fan of his. So it's always been interesting for me to hear songs that he's written with others, outside of my relationship with him, because I can sort of be objective about it, but kind of enjoy it as a fan from a distance. So I think, that would be my favorite Brian song that I didn't write. And then we'd already had the question previously. I think my favorite song that I did write with him, it was is Summer of '69.
Love that one.
Yeah.
And Michael wants to know, any chance of a box set of all of your music in the future?
Wow.
That would take a semi-truck to deliver.
Yes.
If it's a box set of all the stuff I've written with all the artists, that would be, I think, a logistical impossibility to assemble.
Yeah, with record labels and all
Yeah,
that.
with just all the copyrights and the labels and so on. Yeah, that would be a real tough one.
Hey, Jim, I asked Hudson this, and I just sent him a note. Do you pinch yourself every morning going, really? Oh my God, I did what I mean, Mark told me so many amazing stories over the last 20 years, but your career, do you wake up in the morning, other than being with Rachel and just going, oh my God, wow.
I mean, there's a Paul McCartney book I read not long ago where Paul McCartney says some mornings he wakes up and he goes, holy cow, I'm Paul McCartney. So I never wake up and go, holy cow, I'm Paul McCartney.
We all wish we were, but
I know. But, all I can say is I'm so grateful that my whole life, my only job has been music. I pinch myself for that I was able to, from that moment I saw the Beatles on TV until today, that music has not just been my life, but it's been my job. And it's such a wonderful thing to be able to say and to be able to do. It's like a dream come true. So yeah, very, very grateful for all the good things that have come my way, and then I'm still doing music all these years later.
that's great. Look, I've been very fortunate with these four gentlemen here on the show. It's been a tremendous 3-year run. But again, being with people like Mark Hudson, having Melissa call in tonight and that, and just hearing that, it's I'm amazed just seeing your journey. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us, fans, everything.
Thank you.
Absolutely, 100% for sure. Steve, I just want to touch in bed. Are you still with us, man?
I don't know. Where is he?
I'm here.
No worries, man. It's all good.
How are you?
I turned off the camera because
He's like the Jewish Yoda.
I was imitating. Yeah, I was imitating his voice.
No worries, Steve. It's all good, man. We knew that we were still that you were still with us. Just wanted to touch base because it's all you, bro.
Right on. Okay. So you play all these instruments. Do you have a favorite?
I think drums. I mean, I started as a drummer. I took piano lessons when I was like 7 or 8 years old, but I really didn't enjoy it. But after, the Beatles came along, I was happy that I had that background on piano. It came in very handy. but drums is what I wanted to do, and drums is still the instrument that I'm most comfortable on. I could probably sit in with just about any band in the world on drums and be confident and comfortable. Piano or guitar, I'm an okay player, but not like confident enough to stand up and play with the band. But just sitting alone in my studio, I can, given 2 or 3 shots to get it right, I can do a pretty good job on piano or guitar. But drums is where my confidence is.
So you think you could stand up for Getty and with Alex?
You know what? I'd sure give it a try.
Okay.
But I mean, an interesting comment because, 2 great drummers, Ringo and Neil Peart. Neil would be absolutely the wrong drummer for the Beatles, and Ringo would be absolutely the wrong drummer for Rush. But both great drummers. So
Jim, let me throw this out. What about Phil? And I just been listening to Phil Collins' book. What do you think about Mr. Collins?
Great drummer. God, I mean, In the Air Tonight. How awesome is that?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He, Bruford. God, didn't we grow up in a great era?
I think so. Yeah.
Think about it. Between Bonham and right behind me, I have Jason's kit that I bought off him.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
cool. Bonham, just stunning. I mean, he's, one of my favorites ever.
I mean, look, you've been a producer. I talked to Hudson and I kept going, God, the people you guys surrounded yourself with. I mean, everybody from Joey Kramer, who wrote, people discard drummers. And I'm going, wait a second. Do you understand they're the backbeat of everything? Kenny Aronoff, there would be no John Cougar if there was no Kenny Aronoff.
I think drums are it's like building a house. If the foundation isn't solid, it doesn't matter what you put on top. It's not going to work. So if you start with a really great drummer like Bonham or Ringo
and your rhythm section as well, going that end, John Paul Jones, your bass players as well. If your rhythm section's there, you can put everything upon it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's back when I was a kid, they used to say, take piano lessons or take accordion lessons, and then everything else will follow. I think everyone should take drum lessons first, and then take piano lessons. Like Mark's a drummer. Mark Hudson.
Well, like Mark always says, white people clap on the 1 and 3, so that's why we need to take drums.
Nice.
Typical Hudson.
Typical Hudson, that colorful gentleman.
I know. I want to get to this question because
absolutely, Amy, Angel. It was actually about to come right back at you,
right? Because Amy's a big Aerosmith fan, and the time that you met Steven Tyler was when they really needed that hit record because they were coming off Done with Mirrors. So Amy just wants to know what was it like meeting Aerosmith for the first time? What was that like?
Like I said before, it was you're these Stephen and Joe walking into your house and you've never met them before, and you're a fan, and you're just trying really hard not to show that you're freaking out. But we just, before we even picked up our guitars, we just sat down and had a chat, and we talked about one of the things that really bonded us was children. Like we were dads, and we talked about our kids. We talked about our influences. We were all Beatle fans. We were all Rolling Stones fans. So we bonded over mutual kind of loves and favorite things. So that really broke the ice very, very quickly. So when we did sit down and picked up our guitars, we kind of already had formed a very, very quick kind of friendship relationship.
Jim, how the hell do you pick up a guitar with Joe Perry in the room?
Very, very slowly and gingerly. Actually, in that case, it was first song we wrote was Rag Doll, and I actually picked up my bass because, I said to the guys, what do you want to work on? What have you got? And Joe said, I've got this riff, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. And he was just playing. Dun, 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 dun. It was just like key of A, not really going anywhere. And I thought, okay, so I actually grabbed my bass and I went and A, C, 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 G, C. I sort of just, Joe didn't change his riff. I just changed the chords under.
Wow.
Actually, sometimes, or often writing with Brian, I'd like to play bass too, because it's kind of a well-kept secret, I think, that if you're playing bass, you can kind of drive the direction of the song, because even if the guitar player is playing a D chord, and if you play a D chord and then you go to a G chord, it doesn't matter what he does. You're driving. You're setting the changes.
Look, I'm a guitar player, but this is Mr. Tom Hamilton's bass.
Whoa.
Yeah, I bought this off of Tom.
Hold on 1 second, Bobby. I need to get you on the big screen.
Not
Not that big, but be patient.
Sweet.
Yeah. And come on.
What a
Come
great
on,
bass player.
Go and look, Jim. Come on. As soon as you hear Sweet Emotion and you go, oh my God, Tom.
A bass riff. How many of those,
Oh, to write that iconic, as soon as you hear that, tell me goosebumps don't go up your arm as soon as you hear that.
Yeah, and then Joey comes in with that backbeat, and it's just,
And Brad, what such an underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
What
a great band. I mean, the first time I ever saw Aerosmith play, we'd been writing together for a couple of weeks, and they needed to blow off some steam, so they went down to this club in Vancouver. I think there was probably 20 people in the club. Wow. And they just used the band's equipment that was there. They just sat in sort of unannounced, unexpected. That was the first time I'd seen them. And what a band. I mean, those guys could just play anything and it rocked. They were so amazing. Still are.
I mean, again, I got to bring it up. I got to do a big, huge thank you to Mark Weiss. I had the opportunity to shoot them at Fenway Park a couple weeks ago with Extreme opening up. And oh my God, just sitting there. And I got to talk to, Tom. And, he's not doing too well. Joey is not in the band anymore. Joey Kramer.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but I mean, man, it's just, Jim, I'm going to throw it back. Thank you and Mark for doing everything, Mr. Hudson and everything. Thank you, Melissa, for calling in tonight. But look, I get goosebumps knowing that you're here writing my favorite songs.
Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. We're going to kick it back up to Angel, see how we're doing with any more fan questions. It is last call for alcohol fans. We do want to keep Jim's timing in our respects, since he's coming at us with a little bit of a time change. He's been rocking with us all night. But Angel, let's kick it back up to you for the next series of fan questions. We'll spin around the table, double check the questions, and then we'll cut Jim loose for the evening.
Question: when did you realize that music was going to be your path, that you was going to do?
I remember a couple of moments. I mean, as I mentioned, when I was 11, the Beatles knocked my socks off, and I decided I want to do that. And then I played in bands all through high school. And then when it came time, to graduate from high school and go to college, I told my parents I wanted to take music. And they went, no, you can't do that. You can't make a living at that. And I was like, well, that's all I want to do. I think they had tolerated my hobby through high school, but when the rubber hit the road, it was like they did not want me to pursue a career in music. And I kind of stuck to my guns, and I did do a year of music at college, and then dropped out after that because it wasn't really, it was classical music was all that was offered back then. This was 1970. And so I dropped out and then just started playing in nightclubs as a drummer. And there was some real slim year. I remember some months my rent was $75 a month, and there were some months I didn't have the rent. So my parents were kind of right when they said, we're not sure you can make a living at it, because I had some pretty slim weeks and months back then. And then I also remember a moment playing for, I think it was a wedding or a bowling club function or something. I was playing in a band, and they said, you got to play real quiet. You can only play with brushes on your drums. and I remember, looking down at my snare drum, and you had to wear a suit. So I had a suit and a tie and playing really boring music. I just remember looking down at my snare drum and the brushes on the snare drum and like, really, is this what I want to do? Maybe my parents were right. And I had that moment where I just about gave up, but I stuck with it. And
well, Bryanadams thanks you for not giving up.
Shoot, Aerosmith too.
Yes.
Well, I'm grateful to all of those people. It's a team sport. You don't do this alone. You get lucky enough to meet some amazing people like Brian and Stephen and Mark, and you carry on. And there are moments where you go, really, is this going to work? Can I do this? And people lift you up. They carry you.
Absolutely.
If you were stranded on an island, what 3 albums do you have with you?
Oh wow!
Whoa!
only 3.
Yeah, 3 or 4 or 5.
Probably Abbey Road.
Okay.
I would go Aerosmith Rocks.
Exile on Main Street.
That's a good one.
Rolling Stones. Highway to Hell, AC/DC.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, there's so many. I want a whole shelf of them, but I think those 3.
When you talked about Joni Mitchell, would you go with a little bit of Jocko on there?
I'd go with Hey Jira. Yep.
Yes.
I'm a huge Joni fan.
And Sharon wants to know: are you currently working on any new music?
Right at the moment, there's a few things. I mean, Brian's always working on something, so we've got a couple of things we're toying with right now. In fact, I just sent him some drum tracks by email to slot into the thing that we've been working on for the last little while. So, yeah, there's always something.
And no, Julie asks, how many instruments do you play?
I play drums pretty darn good, and I play piano, guitar, and bass kind of okay.
What was your first concert
that I attended?
Yep.
Wow. What was the first concert I attended?
Sober.
I don't remember. You know what? It was Evan Kemp and the Trailblazers. It was a country concert in Vanderhoof, British Columbia. Yeah, that was it. I mean, the first real big one might have been Yes in '75. I think that might have been.
Wow, Tomato Tour.
Yeah, or actually before that, Elton John '72.
Oh, wow! Don't shoot me.
No, I'm wrong again. My first concert was Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, 1968. There you go.
Oh my gosh, we're digging.
My memory fails me, but yeah, it was Frank Zappa, 1968.
That's rad.
What songs are you the most proud of?
Wow, tough question. I'd have to look at a list, and we don't have time for that.
That's like asking me who's my favorite kid.
Yeah, I know. Again, I know I'm
It's
repeating.
a fan question.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Steve. You've got a 50-50
Come on,
chance to get
Steve,
it
you're
right.
like Herschel Walker. You don't have any favorite kids. Oh, wait, sorry, Bobby. Bad question.
You know, a more obscure song of Brian's, maybe called "Heat of the Night." I like that one. I think I enjoyed writing that one. It was a challenge.
Sweet. Okay.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Jim, right now I'm working with Mr. Tony Levin.
Wow, cool.
And, you know, we're fumbling for drummers. I'm just throwing this out. So I put about 5 albums out. I've done a bunch of things. And we're doing a remake of a song that I did with Mr. Jimmy Page. And what's
Whoa,
up?
big names, big shoes to fill.
This would be it would be a firm remake, but it's a song that they did. And if you're up for it, I'm game.
I don't know if I can afford you.
What do you mean if you can? Oh, please. We'll have Hudson produce it.
Oh yeah, Tony's amazing. What a player. Oh.
Tony's great. Look, I brought him in, and I just had Mark here at the house. I had a couple things, but I would love to collaborate with yourself. There's a lot of things that you've done, and I would love to talk to you down the road.
Ring me up.
I will. You know, and it's great. And if we can get Mr. Hudson involved in this, it'll be. Look, you know, you need to pull the reins on him sometimes. Sometimes
I'd follow Mark anywhere. So
oh my God, he whiplashed me so much. I felt like I was in the movie.
That's awesome. Right on. Jim, I got one more thing that I want to ask you before we double check on the fans to make sure the board is clear. And you did some work with a guy that I'm a fan of, a guy I've gotten to also know over the years and gotten to hang with, and Stephen Piercy when he was doing his arcade project.
yeah.
Wow.
How did you get involved working with Stephen?
Again, it was just one of those random calls, probably from his manager or his record company.
Mm-hmm.
He lived in Seattle. I lived in Vancouver, so it was a quick jaunt up for him. And yeah, we spent a week. What a great guy! Yeah, I enjoyed him very much. And the voice, my God, it sounds like he gargles with razor blades. You know, he's just that raspy voice. No, enjoyed him very much. Thanks for reminding me.
No, absolutely, man. 100%. Thank you. Angel, how's the board looking? Are we in good shape, brother?
Just one more fan question, and
Of course.
if you were in a hot tub time machine, where would you go?
Oh wow, that's such an easy question. I mean, I would have given a limb to see the Beatles live. Probably pre-fame. I would have loved to have seen them in a club somewhere. Just, I mean, I got told a great story just a couple of days ago. My friend Lawrence Gowan, who's the lead singer for Styx,
For Styx,
Oh, yeah.
they were touring with Foreigner, and Lawrence got to know Mick Jones a bit. And Mick told him how in 1964, January 64, Mick Jones was a young guitar player backing a singer at the Olympia Theater in Paris. And they got word that this English band was going to open for them next week. And then a few days later, they said, actually, you're going to be opening for the English band. And Mick was like a little bit annoyed about that. So this English band comes, and Mick does his set with a French singer and then goes home because he's so angry he doesn't even want to see this band. And then the next night, the same thing. They do their set, British band goes on, Mick goes home. The third night, as the bands were changing over, John Lennon accidentally kicks Mick's guitar over, and Mick goes, "Oh, damn it!" And John goes, "Oh, you're English? I thought you were French. We're having drinks later. Why don't you stick around?" And Mick stays, to see this bloody British band, and he said he was absolutely knocked out, floored, had never seen anything so good in his whole life ever. So if I could go back in the time machine and see the Beatles way early in their career, I mean that would be my dream come true.
So, Jim, before we cut you loose, as you notice, I'm wearing a gentleman's shirt, and surrounded by me is a bunch of his guitars.
Yeah.
That a gentleman has done for me, Adam Reaver, FU Tone, worked with the guy. Tomorrow is the 2nd anniversary of his passing,
Oh,
Mr. Eddie Van Halen. And I would like to ask your opinion on that. You know, look, I mean, I was never there when I would have loved to have been around when Jimmy started, but Eddie was Van Halen was our Led Zeppelin.
well,
Guys at the time.
I met Eddie way back, and he was such a sweet, lovely man. When Brian and I were working on Brian's very first album, we were in LA at Sunset Sound Studios. We were in Studio B, and Van Halen were in Studio A. And Eddie said, come on over, check out. He showed us his new guitar he had just got, which was, that style, and played us some things.
Wait, would it be the Wolfgang?
No, it was the one with it had the graphics on it. Yeah.
One of these?
Yeah, he had just had that. He had just had it done, and he was really proud of it. So I think Brian and I were one of the first to see that. I think. Wow. But what a lovely man. He was so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, what an innovator of the time. I mean, look, you worked with Joe Perry and everything, and we grew up in a period of the Eddie Van Halens, of the, we talked about Joe Perry and this and that. But, and Jim, wow. I mean, you got to work with these guys who were creators of sound.
Well, I mean, the thing about guitar players, I mean, how many people play guitar in the whole world? Like millions and millions. And how many people play guitar really, really good? Thousands. But you can hear one bar of Eddie Van Halen and it's Eddie Van Halen. You can hear one bar of B.B. King and it's B.B. King. Or, any number of these, Jeff Beck or
Carlos
Santana. There's only a handful of guitar players that are so unique and iconic that one riff and you know who it is. And Eddie was one of those guys. He had a style all his own. I mean, he carved out his own place in guitar history.
I want to ask you this as a producer and everything, and I've talked to Hudson about it. How do you talk to an individual like that without getting intimidated? When you have to tell them, look, no, I think you're either doing too much, you're playing too much, it's overplayed. And I even talked to Mark. I mean, 11 albums with Ringo. I'm going, Mark, how do you talk to a Beatle and tell him, look, dude, no, I think you should do this. And I'm going, Mark, that's a freaking Beatle you're talking to.
I mean, I don't know how you would do that, but I mean, one of my favorite stories is Bob Clearmountain, who did all of Brian's albums. He was working with the Rolling Stones, and he's in the control room, and the Stones are on the other side of the glass, and they're about to do another take. I think it was "Start Me Up" was the song, and they're just about to. And Bob says, "Keith, your guitar's out of tune," and Keith goes, "Good." So maybe that's how you talk to a hero.
I mean, but it's those things. How do you do it without going, oh, am I going to get fired? Am I going to get reprimanded? Where does that come about? And look, I know your position. And I talked to Mark, and I'm going, look, you, Brad, Bill, did a lot of things. But then you're working here. You worked with Cher, Aerosmith, Ozzy, this. You've worked with Desmond. And I'm going, wait a second. How do you bring it up? And they're going, it's confidence.
Yeah, it's confidence, and it's also kindness from the other side. I mean, these people are huge stars and huge talents, but they're also, in my experience, they're kind, and respectful, and they're working with you because they want to, and you're working with them because you want to, and it's mutual respect. And yeah, it does take some confidence. You have to go in kind of knowing your stuff, but there's just a lot of sharing, a lot of heart. These are really nice people, and very down to earth. I haven't met anyone from Ozzy to Stephen to Paul McCartney who wasn't just a nice person.
Well, Mark brought that up a lot and you mentioned Ozzy, and Mark brought that up. He goes, I've never met a sweeter person in my whole life than Ozzy. And I'm so glad you he goes, he is what you say, the prince of, he goes, and Mark brought it up. He goes, you don't know how Ozzy is. He goes, oh my God, he's so much fun to work with.
He might be the most fun I've ever had. He's such a sweet man. And again, as I was saying, he's kind, he's generous, he's thoughtful, he's considerate, and he's really smart and really talented. So you're just so fortunate to be in a room with someone like that. He's a wonderful human being.
Well, Jim, we want to be respectful of your time,
yes.
and Jay, of everything. And again, thank you so much. Thank you for Melissa Hudson for calling in tonight and doing a couple things there. Jim, they will be, Mark even sent me, goes, oh my God, I will be touching back. I'm so sorry. And so he'll be touching base with you. But thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And
very much.
As a fan, this is a highlight as a fan, and just want to say thank you. I'm still starstruck. Did this really happen? I'm not dreaming, right? I'm not gonna wake up and say, "Hey, I had a dream." No, just making sure. That's all. Making sure that I wasn't dreaming.
Absolutely,
and
for
just,
sure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And Jim, thank you for being so cool to work with us on the time change. We appreciate that you were still down to be on the show.
Yes, but it's 20 to 2, I think, in London. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the bar closed? Is the pub closed?
Not till about 4.
I'm on the hook.
Water.
But Metal Summoners, thank you guys as always for tuning in. We're going to let Jim rest up and enjoy the rest of his evening as late as it is. But follow all of the members of the Metal Summit and follow Jim on all of his socials as well as his website for everything that he's got going on. And we look forward to new music that he's involved in and new stuff with Bryanadams, of course. Follow Bobby at BobbyDreyer.com. Follow myself, Angel, and Steve all over Instagram and our other socials as well. And please make sure that you're liking and following the Metal Summit on Facebook and YouTube in particular, because that's where we go live. But of course, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as well. Guest announcement later this week, fans. We got another great one for you as spooky season continues coming up next week. We look forward to hanging out with you guys again. Take care. Have a great weekend. Be good to each other. Horns up. Take care of yourselves. And we'll see you guys real soon. As always, you've been watching the Metal Summit.
Awesome.